Hard to believe. After China's lies and deceit about the coronavirus, the American public, I think, is finally beginning to get it. They're seeing the communist nation for what it is, an enemy of the United States and of free people everywhere. A Pew Research poll last month showed that 2/3 of Americans now have an unfavorable view of China. An RNC survey showed similarly negative views on China among voters in several key battleground states. Now, long before this first case of COVID-19 showed up in Seattle, China had co-opted the World Health Organization. We've talked a lot about that recently, just as they've done, by the way, with Wall Street, our top universities, and the American media, Hollywood. Well, their MO is always the same. Dangle promises of huge financial support or profits, as long as everyone looks the other way on their horrendous human rights and economic record. By using this approach over the last 2 decades or so, now China has grown in wealth, they've grown in power, and they've grown in prestige across every sector. They made the cynical calculation that high-powered Westerners would take short-term payoffs in exchange for freedom and independence. They'd sacrifice the latter. Well, they were right, sadly, at least until they met their match in Donald Trump. His America First approach to trade put China on the defensive, and it forced China to the negotiating table, making concessions and eventually a trade deal that Obama and Bush could or would never make. The globalists were happy with our relationship with China during those 16 years. President Trump, though, right now is trying to walk a fine line. He's not as harsh on China as I'd be, but he has a different job. He is trying to balance our economic needs that are very big right now with national security. And let me be clear, no one, and I mean no one, has done more to stand up to China and tackle the challenges that they pose than Donald J. Trump. His administration is filled with hardcore China realists.
China is a very serious threat to the United States, geopolitically, economically, militarily, and a threat to the integrity of our institutions.
It's assessed our vulnerabilities, and it's decided to exploit our freedoms to gain advantage over us.
Our message to China's rulers is this: this president will not back down. The American people will not be swayed.
But the problem is, too many elites are still totally in the tank for China. The worst offenders, when you think of all the really bad offenders out there, the worst are perhaps the universities, and their connections with China, and thus the CCP, run deep. Since 2013, China has given $1 billion to 115 colleges and universities. Harvard was the biggest recipient, pulling in $93.7 million. But that's not all. A huge number of Chinese students, handpicked by the CCP, are admitted at universities, including Harvard, including, by the way, President Xi's daughter, who graduated from Harvard just a few years back. Now, Harvard has even set up an academic center in Shanghai and established a Harvard China Fund, which supports teaching and research on China and also promotes Harvard's presence in China. China has given Harvard, as I said, $93.7 million, 2,270 Chinese students and scholars at Harvard. Harvard now has an academic center in China. All of this that we've just talked about, this is stunning, stunning stuff. And by the way, Harvard's recruitment of Chinese scholars and Chinese connections, my favorite story. A renowned Harvard researcher, Charles Lieber, was busted for allegedly lying about his involvement in a Chinese recruitment operation. The PRC had paid him $50,000 a month, plus living expenses, for his work at Wuhan University of Technology. And get this, he ran his own nanoscience center at Harvard. He's a brainiac. He received $15 million in grants from, wait for it, the NIH. All the while, he was taking big money from China to allegedly help them recruit talent to then steal our trade secrets. This was Harvard's president last March.
Harvard is an American university, as Beida is a Chinese university. Our institutions have a responsibility to contribute positively to our own societies and to the national good, as well as to the world at large. But as universities, we fulfill this charge precisely by embodying and defending academic values that transcend the boundaries of any one country.
I love the soundtrack, by the way, underneath that. Transcend the boundaries of any nation. Well, as we see in the current pandemic, boundaries do in fact matter, and the CCP's values aren't our values. But this isn't limited to Harvard. I'm not trying to pick on Harvard, they just happen to be the biggest. China has plants among students and researchers across America, most recently at the University of Texas, UCLA, and the University of Kansas. And again, you, the U.S. taxpayers, are perversely funding this.